All right, today we're going to be comparing what it's like to live in Houston, Texas versus what it's like to live in Atlanta, Georgia. And that's coming up right now. Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Mark and I make videos about what it's like to live in Atlanta. I'm also a realtor with a great real estate team here in Atlanta called the Living in Atlanta team. And if you have any real estate needs whatsoever, we would love to help you. You can book an appointment with me directly using the link in the description below. You can give us a call, text, email, whatever you want to do, but please do reach out because that's why we make these videos. All right, so Atlanta versus Houston. These comparison videos have been very popular in the past. I thought it would be great to do Houston because I help a lot of folks who are relocating to Atlanta, either from Houston or another city in Texas. So we are gonna look at a lot of differences. We're gonna look at the cost of living differences, the size and population, the weather, the things to do, and so much more. So hopefully by the end, you have a little bit clearer understanding of the difference between these two great cities. All right, so keep in mind, although I've spent a decent amount of time in Houston, I am not a local, I am not from there. So if I make a mistake, feel free to gently point it out in the comments below. All right, so we're gonna start off with the size of these two cities. And I'm sure most of you know this already, but for those of you who don't, Houston is a much larger city than Atlanta, both in terms of geography and population. The city of Houston has about 2.3 million residents compared to Atlanta's 500,000. But keep in mind, Houston covers an area of about 600 square miles, while Atlanta only covers about 132 square miles. So while these are both sprawling cities to some degree, the Houston sprawl completely dwarfs the Atlanta sprawl. But one thing to note on the sprawl and the density is Atlanta does seem to have a slightly more dense core around the downtown area of other walkable neighborhoods, whereas in Houston, the downtown area seems a bit more isolated, and on the other hand, the sprawl of the city itself extends way further out than Atlanta does. So some slight differences in how the density is distributed between these two cities. Also, I know, at least for Atlanta, it can be tricky to understand what the population is. If you Google population of Metro Atlanta, you have to understand you're looking at over 30 counties. And statistically, 1 in 10 people in Metro Atlanta do not live in the city of Atlanta. So that's not really a great way to understand how populous the city is. And if you're only looking at the city of Atlanta, you're leaving out other surrounding cities that most locals would refer to collectively as the city of Atlanta. So you have city of Decatur, East Point, all these cities surrounding the city of Atlanta. The way that Atlantans really refer to our city in general, most day-to-day terms, is being inside the perimeter, which includes the city of Atlanta, but it also includes other cities as well. Now, I don't have official statistics on the population inside the perimeter of Atlanta, but based on some rough math, it would be around 750,000 people in the perimeter. So while Atlanta is not nearly as small as the internet makes it out to be at times, it is certainly dwarfed by the size and population of Houston. All right, let's talk about weather. Now, these cities are actually somewhat comparable in terms of their climate. Obviously, these are two hot and humid climates overall. The peak temperatures and humidity are definitely going to be a little bit worse in Houston. And although there are 4 distinct seasons for both cities, I think it's a little less defined in Houston. You tend to have a more extended hot season and a more mild winter that makes it overall feel like it blends a little better, where with Atlanta, although it's not nearly as distinct as the Northeast, you do have some pretty clear definition between the seasons. In Atlanta, you're going to typically have a short, rainy, cold winter. From early December to late February, it'll be pretty chilly. From late March to early May, it'll be warm and breezy with plenty of rain. It'll get really hot and humid from late May to early September. You'll have an absolutely gorgeous, cool fall from late September to early November. In Houston, it's a fairly similar situation, but as I said earlier, it's going to get hotter sooner and stay hotter later. And in the wintertime, it's not going to drop down below freezing quite as many days as it will in Atlanta. So if you're looking for a more warm, mild climate, Houston will probably be the choice between the two. If you want a little bit more distinction between the seasons, go with Atlanta, but they both have brutal, hot and humid summers, so keep that in mind. All right, let's go from weather to the geography and nature of these two cities. Now, obviously, Houston is a pretty flat land overall. Lots of marshes, bayous, grasslands, and low prairies. There are plenty of lakes and rivers to enjoy throughout the city. Of course, you've got Galveston Bay close by, so the water is much closer than it will be in Atlanta. Atlanta being completely landlocked, of course, it is a more green space than Houston is. We are known as a city in a forest, so even in the city, you have a lot of incredible greenery, tons of old trees. Again, we have plenty of lakes and rivers in Atlanta to enjoy as well. Now there is a beach, you can go over to Tybee Island, but that's gonna be about a 4.5-hour ride. So you definitely don't have access to huge bodies of water in Atlanta like you do in Houston. All right, let's move on to things to do. Now, of course, these are two major metropolitan cities, so there's going to be plenty to do in both. Pretty much anything you could want to find in a city, both Atlanta and Houston will provide for you, from restaurants, bars, clubs, dancing, sports, music venues, museums. Both of these cities have plenty of those common amenities. Houston in particular is known for having tons of great museum options. You've got the Houston Space Center, you've got big rodeos that you can go to. I already mentioned you have Galveston Bay, which you can enjoy very easily and quickly. And of course, just because of the sheer size difference between Houston and Atlanta, you are gonna have more options by volume in terms of restaurants and overall things to do. But in my opinion, where Atlanta shines in this category are the nature options close by to the city. Now, that's not to say there aren't great nature-related activities in the city of Houston, but for Atlanta, I think it has the edge a little bit here. There are simply more nature-related activities closer to the city in Atlanta. Of course, we've got the Chattahoochee. You don't have to travel far for a great hike or walking trail. And North Georgia offers a lot of diversity as well. We have vineyards up there that you can enjoy in certain times of the year, the Blue Ridge Mountains to the north. So there's a lot of diversity with the nature-related activities you can do pretty close by to Atlanta. So for museums and sports and a lot of the typical tourist-related activities, I would say it's pretty even between these cities. For the nature-related activities, I'd have to give the edge to Atlanta. And for the restaurant scene, I would definitely give the edge to Houston. I've talked about being a little disappointed in the Atlanta restaurant scene before. And Houston is simply much more diverse than Atlanta, which we'll talk about later in the video. You have many different types of cultures living in the Houston area, and this leads to a lot of diversity with the great restaurant options available to you in this area. So I will give the edge for best restaurant scene to Houston. All right, what about the cost of living? Now, according to bestplaces.net, Atlanta is actually 11.4% more expensive to live in than Houston. Now, your gas, groceries, utilities are all gonna be very comparable. The big difference is going to come in with the cost of housing. The median home price in Atlanta right now is about $260,000, while the median house price in Houston is about $185,000. Now, although buying a house is going to be more expensive in Atlanta, you will get a little bit of break with the property taxes. In Fulton County, for instance, your average property tax is going to be about 1% of the value of the home, whereas in Harris County in Houston, it's going to average closer to 2%. Now, renting in these two cities is going to be very similar. Both have an average rent rate of just over $1,500 a month. The big difference here, though, is going to be the amount of rentals available. Atlanta's current vacancy rate is hovering around 3.8%, while Houston's is about 5.1%. So while the prices are comparable, you're going to have more options in Houston Houston, it's going to be slim pickings right now for rentals in Atlanta. All right, so let's move right into the economy, the job industry. So actually, Atlanta recently ranked 49th on Wallet Hub's list of the best job markets in America. And Houston came in at 97th on this list. Atlanta's current unemployment sits at about 5.3%, while Houston's is hovering around 8%. And Atlanta has a future projected job growth of about 46.8%, while Houston's projection is about 30.9%. So although you'll get different information based on the source you're searching for, it does seem like Atlanta's job market is currently a bit stronger than Houston's. Now, one distinction to make between these two cities is the diversity of the economy. Atlanta has an especially diverse economy. We have big sectors for medical, tech, finance, TV, film, shipping, education, and much more. Houston's economy has a slightly more narrow focus with energy, biomedical, and healthcare. Now, this is especially important if you're a real estate investor trying to choose between these two markets, because you want a reliable flow of people using your rentals or buying your flips. It helps to have a city with a diverse economy so that if one sector crashes, you're not left with high vacancy rates. All right, let's jump back into taxes real quick. We talked about property taxes, but what about income and sales tax? Well, as most of you probably already know, Texas has 0 state income tax, whereas most Georgians are going to be paying about 5.75% in additional state income tax. Now, Houston's sales tax is a bit high at 8.25%, but so is Atlanta's, coming in at about 8%. All right, let's talk about crime. Now, statistics for crime can be very misleading when you're researching these things on the internet, and there are a lot of factors you should be considering for your safety outside of the pure statistics. I always advise clients, if you're looking to buy or rent in a certain area, you're going to want to make sure you spend time driving through that area, look at the foot traffic, look at how the homes are maintained, go during different times of the day, different days of the week, and talk to neighbors whenever possible. But based on statistics, there's no doubt that Atlanta has higher rates of both property and violent crime. Now, one important note here, when researching crime in these cities, it became evident that crime statistics are on the rise through most major metropolitans throughout the country. A lot of people think that has to do with COVID and a lot of the major events that have gone on in our country over the last couple years. So hopefully we will see some return to normalcy soon. And while I don't think researching online gives you a totally accurate view of the safety in either one of these cities, statistically speaking, Atlanta loses out in this category. All right, let's talk about a big pain point, and it's traffic. How does the traffic compare in Houston versus Atlanta? So if you just go based off statistics, again, it can be misleading because the statistics I look at show a shorter average commute time in Atlanta, but obviously that's going to have a lot to do with the sheer size of Houston. You're probably going to have to go further in Houston, and so your commute time is going to be a bit longer. But after researching a lot of different angles to this, I think it's safe to say the traffic is definitely worse in Atlanta. Now, while Houston has an overall higher volume of traffic, it also has a much more robust infrastructure in terms of the size and quantity of the major highways that you can commute on. If you pull up Houston on a map, you'll see very obviously it looks somewhat like a bullseye, as there are multiple loops around the city, which are of course interstates. Now, if you pull up Atlanta on a map, you'll see very obviously there's only one loop, the perimeter, 285. So simply put, there are more ways to bypass traffic in Houston than there are in Atlanta. It's much easier to get stuck in major congestion in Atlanta because there's just simply less ways to avoid it. Now, what about public transportation? How do these cities stack up? Now, honestly, these are both pretty car dependent cities. If you live in either one, you're probably gonna need to own a car. Now, I can tell you in Atlanta, you are definitely gonna need to own a car. We do have a decent public transportation system with MARTA. There are plenty of bus lines to get around, but we do lack in heavy rail. We have 4 lines. They're only going north, south, east, west. So it's pretty limited in how you can commute with heavy rail, although you may live in an area that's close to a station and allows you to cut down on your commute in a car. It's probably going to be extremely difficult to cut the car out completely. Now, honestly, when researching public transit in Houston, I had a much harder time getting a sense for the quality of public transit and the locals' overall feelings about it. Now in Houston, again, it seems like you have a very robust system of buses to get around. You do have some heavy and light rail, but by no means is this going to allow you to cut out a car completely. And in Houston in particular, probably based much on the size of the city, it just doesn't seem like public transit is in people's blood. It doesn't seem like they're interested in expanding it or they have much of a need for it. So keep in mind, if you're coming from a city in the Northeast or the Pacific Northwest with a great public transit, heavy rail system, Houston and Atlanta are not really going to fit the bill for this. These are large, sprawling, not dense cities where probably you will need to own a car to get by from day to day. All right, let's talk about diversity in these 2 cities. Obviously, this is going to be a really important topic for a lot of folks, and it's one of the first questions I usually get asked when people are relocating to Atlanta. So looking at the statistics, it's quite clear Houston is much more diverse than Atlanta. In fact, Houston is pretty much the most diverse city in America. So Houston's demographic is about 23.3% white, 22.4% black, and 44% Hispanic. Atlanta is about 51% black, 40% white, 4.5% Asian, and 4.3% Hispanic. So while Atlanta is diverse in the sense of having a white minority, we simply cannot claim to have the variety or overall diversity that Houston does. But if this is an important topic to you, you've been looking at Atlanta, don't get nervous. Atlanta is overall pretty diverse and pretty accepting of different cultures, especially if you're within 45 minutes to an hour of Atlanta proper. I don't think you're going to run into issues of bigotry, so don't be too nervous that Atlanta is not quite as diverse as Houston. All right, let's talk about the differences in education between these 2 cities. Now, honestly, in doing this research, this was probably the most difficult topic to get a handle for. Statistically, according to bestplaces.net, Atlanta spends $16,062 per student on average on education, and Houston spends on average $10,310 per student for education. And the student-teacher ratio is slightly better in Atlanta with 13.7 students per teacher, whereas in Houston, it's 18.7 students per teacher. Now, 89.9% of students graduate high school in Atlanta versus 77.9% in Houston, and 48.7% of students in Atlanta finish college versus 31.7% in Houston. Now, speaking specifically for Atlanta, we do have incredible, robust higher education here. In fact, we are known for attracting top diverse talent, especially in the tech industry, between Georgia Tech, Georgia State University, and all of the amazing historically black colleges and universities throughout the city. We have a lot of top talent in the higher education sector. However, our public schools in the city are quite lacking. Other than the city of Decatur, the schools inside the perimeter are generally not very good. If you're looking for some of the best public school districts, you will have to travel north outside of the city. So there you have it, some major differences between Atlanta and Houston. These are 2 great American cities, and if you're trying to choose between the 2, honestly, it's going to come down to what are the most important factors for you. Both have all of the amazing amenities you would expect from a major city in terms of the restaurants, bars, museums, art, and sports teams that you'd want to find. Houston is a little warmer, Atlanta is a little greener. Houston is a little cheaper, and Atlanta has more opportunity. Houston's closer to the beach, Atlanta's closer to lakes, rivers, and mountains. Both have absolutely terrible traffic, and as for the barbecue, no comment. All right, so I hope you found that video helpful. I have a ton of content related to living in Atlanta, so make sure you search through my page and search through the playlist to educate yourself about our great city. It would mean so much if you liked this video and hit subscribe. And until my next video, I'll see you next time.